Okay, nice to see you all. We're beginning another little unit. This will only be six classes and then a break, and then another unit of 5 classes before we break for August. So we're going to begin with a few prayers, including the prayer called the Yondan Shugurma, Foundation of Good Qualities. And there you go. But we're going to begin with our usual taking refuge in generating bodhicitta first. Sangye chorang soki chognam la jangchu badu dagni kapsu chi dagi chunyen gi pe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Mahayana Assembly due to the collections I accumulate, I create by listening to the Dharma. That's what we're doing. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrating beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu bardu dagni kapsu chi dagi chunyen gi pe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho. And then short mandala. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. And then the request, while still holding the Dharma, the mandala, so as though offering to our primordial guru, requesting, O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma. Send down a rain of the extensive and the profound lineages, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained, our disciples. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. And then the prayer, the foundation of all good qualities, that was composed by Lama Tsong Khapa. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect guru. Correctly following the guru is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely on the guru with great respect. When I have discovered the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, that's what we discover when we understand that. It is extremely difficult to find again, being greatly meaningful. Please bless me to unceasingly generate the mind, taking its essence day and night. This body and life are changing, are impermanent, like a water bubble. They're very sensitive. Remember how quickly they perish and how quickly death comes, as well as the fact that after death, just as a shadow follows the body, the result of black and white karma follow me into future lives. When I have found definite conviction in this, please bless me to always be conscientious in abandoning even the slightest collections of shortcomings, any negative, even the smallest negative karmas, and in accomplishing all virtuous deeds. When I have recognized the shortcoming of samsaric perfections, that there is no satisfaction in enjoying them, that they are the door to all suffering, and that they cannot be trusted, please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Through my being led by this pure thought, with great recollection, alertness, and conscientiousness, please bless me to make keeping the individual liberation vows, pratimoksha vows, which are the root of the teachings, my essential practice. And as we've said many times in the prayers, many times it says to take this as your essential practice. At the beginning, to take the keeping of your vows of individual liberation as your essential practice. Later on, it will be taking, exchanging self and others as your essential practice and so forth. Then, just as I have fallen into the ocean of samsara, so too have all migrating beings, mother migrating beings. By seeing this, please bless me to train in supreme bodhicitta, which bears the responsibility of freeing migrators. So this means not simply the wishing bodhicitta, but taking the responsibility of freeing them, ourself, with the exceptional thought, the laksam. Even if I develop bodhicitta without familiarizing myself with the three types of morality, I cannot achieve enlightenment. By my seeing this well, please bless me to keep the vows of the sons of the victorious ones with fervent effort. So here, going to the point of actually engaging in the bodhisattva's deeds, not just thinking about it. By having pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to quickly generate within my mind stream the unified path of shamatha and vipassana, calm abiding and special insight. When I have become a vessel by training in the common path, a vessel for the tantric teachings, please bless me to immediately enter the holy gateway for the fortunate beings, the supreme of all vehicles, the Vajrayana, the supreme of all yanas, the Vajrayana. At that time, the basis, the foundation for accomplishing the two attainments is keeping my vows and samayas purely. When I have gained effortless conviction in this, please bless me to protect them even at the cost of my life. Then, when I have realized exactly the vital points of the two stages, the generation stage and the completion stage, the essence of the tantric sets, and I am enjoying the yoga of 4 sessions with effort without being distracted by non-meditation objects, please bless me to accomplish these according to the teachings of the holy beings. I think there's some more, right? There we go. Thus may the virtuous friends who reveal the noble path and the spiritual practitioners who, along with me, correctly accomplish it, have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely the outer and inner collections of obstacles. In all my lives, may I never be separated from perfect gurus. May I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. And by completing the qualities of the grounds and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Thank you. So we're going to begin with little meditation again. So sit comfortably. Relax your body if you can. Relax your mind. Remember that there's nothing else that you have to attend to now, even though you might be tempted to multitask, be planning and remembering other things. We're going to focus, first of all, on this very simple but profound object of the respiration that the Buddha taught again and again. First, recognizing it, and once recognized, holding it in mind with the mental factor mindfulness, only recognizing the difference, with analysis, only analyzing whether it's a long or short breath, whether it's an inhalation or an exhalation, just those simple factors. letting go of all other thoughts. Besides calming the mind, implicitly you can realize that all impermanent things have an origin. They increase, they sort of are produced, like our meeting of friends and family, brothers and sisters. And at the end, like the inhalation, and at the end of the inhalation, when it's just static, it's like our period of abiding with our friends and family, our loved ones. But inevitably, then, like the exhalation, things separate. They grow old, they pass away, they separate from us in distance. It's inevitable until they're gone, until we're gone. Whereupon, again, like a new inhalation, new horizons open, new lives arise. And leaving your mindfulness of the breathing, place your attention instead on the mental consciousness now. Its contents, recognizing that the contents appears there in your mind, emotional states, agitation, anger, irritation. Oh, good states, elation, happiness, neutral states, observations, memories of the past. plans of the future, observations about the present, things that just pop into our mind by association due to the thoughts that were previously there. Instead of focusing on those and letting them run the show, place your attention on the spaciousness within which those thoughts arise, the clear light nature of the mind. Deprive those thoughts of their sustaining energy, which is our paying attention to them. Taking our attention away from them, they begin to subside in intensity and frequency. And we're left with like a clean slate, a mind that is temporarily devoid of conceptualizing thoughts. We can recognize the nature, conventional nature of this as a lack of any obstruction to the entry, arisal of thoughts and to their absorption back into the consciousness. This lack of obstruction, called the conventional Buddha nature, clear light, conventional clear light nature of the mind, not the ultimate clear light nature, which is emptiness, but something similar, sort of has the aspect of vacuity. And this we begin to recognize with a pleasant feeling. This is our resource. This allows us, shows us that we can develop all good qualities, those things that we might admire, but feel that we just can't do it. We do have the capacity. There's nothing preventing the arisal of good qualities in our mind, even bodhicitta, compassion, forgiveness, wisdom. And there's nothing that prevents the elimination of our bad habit energy, our ego, our big ego, our anger, our disregard of others, our ignorance. All of these can be eliminated due to this clear light nature of the mind, which we can recognize now due to the fact that we have found an auspicious moment. The Buddha called this life of leisure and endowment an auspicious moment, very having great significance, but coming very, very rarely. And even when it does come, often wasted on the worldly pursuits, fame, possessions, desire to be loved and to be famous, to be powerful and wealthy and so forth. Remembering the Buddha's teachings that this life of leisure and endowment that we have right now can be used for greater purposes of achieving liberation or enlightenment, at least to create the karma for future human lives in the upper realms, especially in the human realm. But to go beyond that, it can be used to end our cycling in samsara, to achieve liberation, to achieve nirvana. And remembering the Buddha's teachings that he he said again and again that those with intelligence shouldn't be satisfied with his lesser vehicle teachings, with his Hinayana teachings, which so many did practice. Great lay people, benefactors, great arhats, bhikshus, hearers, and solitary realizers. But to take aim for full enlightenment, samyak sambodhi, fully accomplished enlightenment, not just the small bodhi, the small enlightenment of the hearers and solitary realizers, which is essentially their nirvana, but to aim to achieve enlightenment from which state we can effortlessly and spontaneously benefit all sentient beings till the end of time without error, having developed a warm feeling for them, affectionate love, and then compassion and great love. Eventually taking the responsibility to achieve enlightenment for their welfare, discarding the attractive way station of achieving nirvana for ourselves, just giving up working for the benefit of sentient beings. In order to do that, we have to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom, which are the causes of the enlightened beings' form and mental bodies, the Rupakaya and Dharmakaya. In order to accumulate those two collections, we need to know how to do it, how to accumulate merit, how to accumulate wisdom, which are explained in Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom and extensively augmented by Chandrakirti's Madhyamakavatara and commented on by Lama Tsongkhapa's Illumination of the Intent, which we're studying. So think, I'm going to listen, contemplate on the meaning of the words to develop the wisdoms of hearing and contemplation. And when I have an insight, sort of a clear conclusion of contemplation, when something seems to be true, to hold it single-pointedly in mind to develop the wisdom of meditation. I'm going to participate in the class today with that goal in mind, to achieve enlightenment by accumulating the two collections for the welfare of all sentient beings. Okay. So good to see you. Hi, KT, and Anna's here. Paul, Richard, Rocio has appeared. Still missing John. I think John said that he was going to come, but he hasn't shown up yet. So, how is everyone? Do you have a good break? It's something accomplished. So, any questions that are lingering from where we were? We've been talking about this section in Chandrakirti's text, and Lama Tsongkhapa is elaborating on it, on the production from other. We already refuted the Samkhya position of production from self-production. Well, you might say they're not the only ones, but that's the only major philosophical school at the time of Nagarjuna and so forth that propounded self-production, that things could be produced from themselves. Now we're in the refutation of production from others, and as we'll see, production from others, that very statement implies the implication of that is that the person is thinking production from an inherently existent other, not just from a mere other. So that's where we're at. So any questions so far? Lingering? No? Okay. This is a good sign would be if there were some questions. But anyway, yeah, good enough. Oh, okay. Nadine has a question.
Thank you very much, George. In April, you once mentioned abandoning the 8 faults of realizing emptiness. And you did not really explain what it means. What is the 8 faults of realizing emptiness? I have no idea what the 8 faults of real.
I'm not sure what you're saying. The egg form? What
Eight.
Oh,
8 faults.
Oh, okay.
Arrows of realizing emptiness.
Okay. So at the beginning of Nagarjuna's treatise, he talks about these 8 misconceptions. We'll talk about it again a little bit later. Right now, for instance, when we talk about the also the word 8 verses of training the mind, you know, the 8 verses of training the mind. What is the 8th verse in that? Nadine, do you know? Of course, there are many different English translations, there's German translations, but do you know the 8th verse?
Yeah, Geshe Langri Tangpa. I think the last verse, it mentions abandoning the 8 worldly dharmas.
Right.
And realizing emptiness, maybe? I'm not sure. I knew them by heart, but I don't recite them every day now.
With one way of saying it, with none of these actions imperiled by conceptions of the 8 dharmas, and one of the ways of interpreting that is the 8 worldly dharmas, but with none of these actions imperiled by conceptions of the 8 dharmas, and by seeing all phenomena as illusory, may I be freed from the bondage of samsara. Does that sound familiar to some of you? You may have slightly different words. So usually, or oftentimes when people translate it, they add worldly dharmas, with none of these actions defiled by the stains of the 8 worldly dharmas. But the text doesn't say worldly dharmas, it says the 8 dharmas, and that refers to these 8 faults that Nadine is referring to. That is to say, when His Holiness has explained the 8 verses of training the mind, he said, this last verse sounds a little bit funny. He said, on one hand, it says, if you were interpreted as with none of these actions stained by the 8 worldly dharmas. So that's talking about conventional reality, right? Not being prone to the 8 dharmas, the 8 worldly dharmas, which if you're engaging in them, if your mind is, if you're not alert enough to abstain from those, all the actions that you'll create will be in somehow mixed dharmas. Even if you try to create virtuous actions, if your motivation is stained by the 8 worldly dharmas, your actions won't be pure white dharma. They'll be mixed dharma, like a rope that has white and gray or black threads wrapped together. When your virtuous karma ripens, it will be modified by the 8 worldly dharmas that you were motivated by. And then in the last part, it then says, and then by seeing all phenomena as illusory, may I be free from the bondage of attachment. That's talking about which kind of meditation on emptiness is that, Mikhail?
You mean the 8 wrong conceptions?
No, the last part. And by seeing all phenomena are as illusory.
Yeah, I'm not sure what
Is that
you're
the space?
asking.
Is that the space-like meditation on emptiness?
No. No,
That's
it's different.
that's
It's the post meditation, the subsequent attainment when you have understood emptiness and you raise from meditation, then
and
all phenomena appear as illusions.
yeah, you see everything as illusion. You say, "Oh my gosh, that looks so real," but it's an illusion. You know, it's like an illusion. It's appearing, but it doesn't exist. So His Holiness said, you know, when you interpret it the traditional way that it's often explained, the first part talking about the eight worldly dharmas, the second part of the eighth verse talking about the illusion-like meditation on emptiness, that leaves a little bit unsatisfying. And he said that there are other traditions that explain the first part, talking about with none of these actions imperiled, you could say, by conceptions of the eight dharmas, these eight faults, considering phenomena as being inherently existent and so forth. That's talking about the the meditative equipoise on emptiness, the space-like meditation on emptiness, without your space-like meditation on emptiness being defiled by elaborations of true existence. You know, different kinds of conceptual thoughts that are thinking maybe they're inherently existent, or maybe they're you know, that phenomena, that the Chittamatra view is correct and so forth. So that's one way of talking about those eight faults. So we'll talk about that again in another time, but I just wanted to mention that now, so that sort of in relationship to the eight verses of training the mind. Okay, Nadine?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay. So Richard, yeah.
Yes, hi, Venerable George. Just looking at the text, the phrase "the reverse of the consequences" is sort of not really something that I remember exactly what it means. Could you just give a brief example of what's meant by the reverse of consequences?
Right. So you can talk about reversal of the syllogism or reversal of the consequence. So in both cases, they amount to the same thing. You have a subject, a predicate, and a sign in a syllogism and in a consequence. So to reverse a consequence would mean to take the reverse of the sign, the opposite of the sign, and place it in a new syllogism that you're creating. So when you reverse a consequence, you're going to end up with a syllogism. If you reverse a syllogism, you're going to end up with a consequence. So if you reverse a consequence, you take the reverse of the sign of the consequence, the opposite of the sign, and you put it in the predicate of this new syllogism that you're going to be creating, right? And you take the opposite of the predicate of the consequence and put it as the sign in the new syllogism that you are creating. Same thing holds if you make the opposite of a syllogism. If you throw the reverse of a syllogism, you take the opposite of this of the sign of the syllogism, you put it as the predicate of a consequence, and you take the opposite of the predicate of the syllogism and put it as the sign of the consequence. If we had talked about this, you know, a couple of months ago, to keep all of those things in mind, right now, can you kind of keep all of that in mind?
Sort of. It's hard to understand the abstract.
Right.
Very hard to understand, frankly.
Say again? I like Frank's statement. Say that again.
Yeah, frankly, it's very hard to understand in the abstract. I don't know about others, but if I had an example, it would make it a lot easier for me.
Right. So the classic example, of course, here we're talking about many things, criticizing the Svatantrika, Bhava Viveka's view and so forth. But to use a classic example, we start with this, start with a syllogism. Sound is impermanent because it's a product. You could have an example, like a pot. And a pot is a good example because you can see that a pot is a product. It's the product of the what do you call it? The potter's the potter's action with the wheel and the clay and everything. Okay, so sound is impermanent because it's a product. So to some individuals that had some misconceptions, you might throw the following consequence. You would take the opposite of the sign of that syllogism. What's the opposite of the sign of that syllogism, Richard?
Would it be impermanence?
No, that's the predicate.
That's the predicate. Okay, so
Sound is impermanent because it's a product. What's the opposite?
Product.
What's the opposite of product?
Something that's not produced, obviously.
Yeah, a non-product, you could say, or
non-product.
uncompounded. So sound is impermanent because it's a product. So we're going to take non-product and put it as the predicate of this new consequence. And then we're going to take the opposite of the predicate of that syllogism. The syllogism is sound is impermanent because it's a product. What's the opposite of the predicate?
Permanence is permanent.
Yeah, not impermanent or permanent. We're going to put that as the sign. So we would have the consequence. It follows that sound is not a product because it's permanent.
Right.
Would that be the consequence that's thrown, Paul? Is that right? It follows that sound is not a product,
right?
Because it's permanent.
If that's, I mean, if you're trying to, I mean, obviously that would be the Sankhya position, right?
That would be the position of some non-Buddhists that Vedic who have this idea that sound is permanent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that the sound of the Vedas are permanent, yet they still know that sound is a product. But so you place this consequence to them in order to break up that firm adherence in their mind that sound is permanent. So you say that sound is not a product, which is something they don't accept because it's permanent. Okay, so that's a tangible.
So the reversal of the consequence. The reversal of the consequence is being used here to demonstrate the absurdity of believing that sound is permanent.
Here is actually that's the reversal of the syllogism.
Reversal of the syllogism.
Yeah, you could then take the reversal of the consequence and get back to the syllogism again. So yeah, you're using that to start to
basically dismantle
Right.
a delusion. Okay.
to erode or dismantle their adherence, both that sound is permanent and that sound is they accept that sound is a product. They know that sound is a product. You can ding, ring the bell and everything like that. Okay, so that's just one example. The other examples are more esoteric that are coming in the text.
That's great. This gives me a good idea.
So that gives you an idea of what's going on.
of what's to come. Thanks.
Okay, so last time we started with this long thing on what was it on? And jump up page 209, I think, and 111 on the FPMT translation. And we had a note at that point. Let me see here, 396. So this was in talking about this example. Let me just read a little bit here. In fact, this very expression, toppling with a domino effect, reveals that theirs is an argument betraying ignorance of the way of reasoning. That this is so I have discussed extensively elsewhere. Do you remember that? So that's on approximately on page 209 in Jimpa's text and 111 in the FPMT. So I think we mentioned in the discussion group the Monday following that last class, the origin, what Jimpa had suggested when he said in note 396, he said, see, for example, essence of true eloquence, and for an English translation, see Thurman's central philosophy. So Robert Thurman, when I'm not sure if that was the original title of his translation of Lekshe Ningpo Paul, was it? Central philosophy?
Yeah, I think it was originally the Speech of Gold, essence of true. Yeah, something like that.
And right, so Jimpa says, see, for example, essence of true eloquence. For an English translation, see Thurman's central philosophy. So I think Thurman's translation of the essence of true eloquence had that in its title originally, and maybe later when it was republished, it was called Central Philosophy. But anyway, that's Robert Thurman's translation of Lama Tsongkhapa's Lekshe Ningpo. So that was what Jimpa was suggesting that we talk about. And in the discussion group on Monday, following that, I mentioned this text that had 3 columns on 2 pages. Did you guys get that? So we went through that a little bit, and I'll just mention a little bit at just to make the segue to today. Shankar, do you have that text? Do you have that particular PDF?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that, please?
Do you have that PDF?
Is it called,
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
is
Okay.
it called Smoky Pass?
Yes.
Okay, I'll put it in chat.
Thank you. I
So-
missed last time, so yeah.
Yeah. So in the second part, anyway, this is talking about the following. Certain people misinterpret the logic of when you prove, for instance, that on a smoky pass, you know what a smoky pass means? That means in the mountains, where there's a little opening in the mountains, you can go over and you see smoke there. And maybe you can determine that that's actually smoke. It's not just the dust that is brought up by the feet of the yak or the horses or mules that are walking there. It's not just clouds, it's actually smoke. On a smoky pass, fire exists because smoke exists. Is that a good syllogism? Is that a proper, correct syllogism? Okay, some people are thinking, some people are nodding.
Could you repeat that again, please?
On a smoky pass, fire exists because smoke exists. Is that correct? Well, say, for instance, the usual, you can start off when you first try to make a relationship between smoke and fire, that the existence of smoke implies fire. You could say in a smoky kitchen, fire exists because smoke exists. And you can verify that in your own experience, right? When you go into the Tibetan, especially maybe Indian kitchens also, not just Tibetan kitchens, because the fuel is often cow dung, what's it called? Cow patties, which makes a lot of smoke. So in the smoky kitchen, you can actually see with your own eyes. You look into the stove and you see there's fire. In the smoky kitchen, fire exists because smoke exists, and you can develop an inferential understanding as a result of that. First of all, you see by direct perception that, and then you can infer that where there is smoke, there will always be fire. Okay, so some people misunderstand this and think that having proved it once with respect to the smoky kitchen, that it would not necessarily follow for other situations, like on a smoky pass, that you could infer that fire exists. You would have to prove it again and again, the relationship between smoke and fire for all different kinds of situations. But Chandrakirti in the Prasanapada and Lama Tsongkhapa in his elaboration on that. So in his Lekshe Ningpo, he was referring to this section of that PDF that was just put up in the chat, I guess. Richard or someone just put it up. This particular little segment here. So let me see, which is this? So on the second part of that page, where the letters are a little bit smaller, the type is a little bit smaller. So the middle column is Jeffrey Hopkins' translation of this section from the Lekshe Ningpo, which is quoting Prasanapada. He says, with respect to Jayananda's reason why the pervasion is not validly established, he says, in paraphrase, direct perception realizes that the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in a kitchen, right? That's what we're talking about, this example. The existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in a kitchen. So in a smoky kitchen, fire exists because smoke exists. So when we talk about pervasion, the forward pervasion would mean that fire pervades the sign smoke, the predicate fire in a smoky kitchen. Fire exists, the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke, which is the sign, right? Okay. See if the gears are working here. Direct perception realizes the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in a kitchen. That's something you can see, as a kid or as an adult. That is, the existence of fire occurs with every existence of smoke in a kitchen. When you say that pervades, it does not realize that the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in all places and all times. This is Jayananda's misinterpretation of what Chandrakirti was saying. His misinterpretation of let's say of Dharmakirti's logic. Okay, he's saying that although it realizes that the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in a kitchen, but it does not realize that the existence of fire pervades the existence of smoke in all places and all times. But when we use this kind of logic, once you've established it in one situation, it will continue on, and this is the subject matter of Dharmakirti's first chapter in the Pramanavartika, that logic, that pervasion can be shown to be true in other situations also. So the text continues. Also, inference, that means an inferential cognizer or a logical reason, does not realize that the predicate of the probandum, remember, that means the predicate. You have the subject, the predicate, and the sign. The subject and the predicate form the probandum or the thesis, right? So the predicate of the probandum just means the predicate, the middle element there. Also, inference does not realize that the predicate of the probandum, that is the predicate of what is being proved, the existence of fire, he doesn't realize that pervades the sign of the existence of smoke in all places and all times. This is Jayananda's wrong idea. Therefore, pervasion is established only through the world's assertion of it and not established by valid cognition. This is Jayananda's misinterpretation that Lama Tsongkhapa is trying to clear up, and that was being referred to here in our text when it says, in fact, the very expression of toppling with a domino effect, that means what? What was the Tibetan, Paul? Dopa. Oh, what did we say? Pulpum.
Yeah, Pungpulwa.
Pulpua. The sort of what in the FPMT translation they said was the opposite of deduction. What is the opposite of deduction? Induction, right? Induction. This was Jose Cabezon translated that as. So he says, this I have discussed extensively elsewhere. So this is supposedly the passage that Lama Tsongkhapa was referring to, and not just this passage alone, but this section in the Lekshe Ningpo. So Lama Tsongkhapa's answer to Jayananda's misconception that you haven't proved it by valid cognition, that the existence of smoke will infer the existence of fire, that fire pervades smoke. Okay, Jayananda says that you only do it by worldly renown. So Lama Tsongkhapa says this also is very unsuitable, or as Robert Thurman's translation in the third column says, this is entirely wrong. It's a little bit better. This is very unsuitable because Jayananda is making a refutation upon misapprehending the meaning of the establishment of pervasion described in the texts of logic. So the texts of logic, Dharmakirti, when they talk about pervasion, that fire pervades smoke, right? In a smoky kitchen, fire exists because smoke exists. The forward pervasion, you remember what the forward pervasion is, David, in a syllogism? You're muted on purpose?
Yes, on purpose. Sorry. The syllogisms, the terminology and syllogisms. I didn't do well in logic in college, so.
Okay, I didn't either. I didn't take logic. So we're talking in Buddhist logic. So when we talk about, let's say a syllogism, we have the subject, the predicate, and the sign, right? the subject and the predicate form the thesis. In this case, one case, sound is impermanent, or in this case, on a smoky pass, fire exists. That's the thesis, that's the probandum that you're trying to prove. And then you have a sign at the end that you're trying to use to prove the thesis. Like on a smoky pass, fire exists because smoke exists, or in a smoky kitchen, fire exists because smoke exists. So when you have a syllogism, you have to have three things, what Tibetans call sulsum. It looks like that's also reflected in the Sanskrit. I think Paul and I were spending a couple of hours coming to that conclusion. We were actually able to find the Sanskrit for that. But what are the three elements that are necessary, Mikhail, for a correct syllogism?
The three modes are the property of the reason.
Property of the subject.
Subject, sorry.
Right.
Yeah. The forward pervasion and the counter pervasion.
Right. The property of the subject means that the subject has to be in the reason. So in the case of sound is impermanent because it's a product, it has to be ascertained that sound is a product. Or in a smoky kitchen, fire exists because smoke exists. It has to be true that in a smoky kitchen, smoke exists. So that's the property of the subject. And it has to have the two pervasions, the forward pervasion and the reverse pervasion or the counter pervasion. And as we mentioned before, if you're able to establish one of those pervasions, the other one will necessarily also follow. It just depends on which is easier. You don't always have to prove both of them. So in the example of the smoky kitchen, Mikhail, what's the forward pervasion?
If there is smoke, there is fire. The existence of...
So the pervasion is that fire has to pervade smoke, which means when there is smoke, there will be fire, right? So when you say pervade, what's pervading? Fire pervades smoke. That means
smoke is pervaded by fire.
Right. Okay. So here he says that's very unsuitable, or as Thurman says, is completely wrong, entirely wrong, because he is mistaking a refutation upon misapprehending the meaning of the establishment of pervasion describes in the text and logic. Because it is not at all the meaning of the text that the establishment of the pervasion of the existence of smoke by the existence of fire in the context of a kitchen is that one is proving that the existence of kitchen fire pervades the existence of kitchen smoke. It's not limited to that. That is, that the fire in the kitchen occurs with every instance of smoke in the kitchen. Otherwise, it would absurdly come to be that one proves the existence of kitchen fire on a pass possessing smoke, a mountain pass, through the sign of the existence of kitchen smoke. So you might say, what was he talking about? So once you've established that, the pervasion that in a smoky kitchen, fire exists because smoke exists, that's not limited. You're not limited to the pervasion that the pervasion is that fire pervades smoke, right? The forward pervasion. That is, wherever there is smoke, there is fire. You're not limited to proving just the pervasion that kitchen fire pervades kitchen smoke. You're proving the pervasion that fire pervades smoke. That is, wherever there is smoke, there is fire. You're not limited to just wherever there is kitchen fire, there is kitchen smoke. It's more broad than that. you're able to understand that, you're able to understand it by valid cognition. So otherwise it would absurdly come to be that one proves the existence of kitchen fire on a pass possessing smoke, means a mountain pass possessing smoke, through the sign of the existence of kitchen smoke. Because when the pervasion of the existence of fire is proven through the sign of the existence of smoke on a pass, one proves the pervasion of the example of that which is held as a sign by that which is held as the predicate, and the mode of proving that is also as before. So anyway, this is a little bit complicated, but I wanted to share that with you. That's what's being talked about here in that text when it said, I've discussed extensively elsewhere. So this is mainly talking about this particular misapprehension of some, exemplified by Jayananda. Remember, Jayananda is the Indian commentator of Madhyamaka that Lama Tsongkhapa sometimes agrees with, sometimes disagrees with. Jayananda mainly, from Lama Tsongkhapa's point of view, misunderstands the Svatantrika position, but also a lot of the positions about logic. In this particular one, Jayananda is thinking that simply establishing that kitchen fire exists because kitchen smoke exists, he thinks that's limited, and that that doesn't, you haven't realized by valid cognition that wherever smoke exists, fire exists. You haven't realized the general pervasion that fire pervades smoke. Okay, Shanka, you're ruminating on this for the first time.
Actually, yes. So two things. Would you tell me in this PDF that we are working on? So both the two columns are basically translations from the central philosophy, right?
They're both translations from
page 325 in
from Lexi Ningbo, right?
Okay, got it. So that this is
325.
Yeah, this is Robert Thurman's translation. Okay.
So the middle column is Jeffrey Hopkins' translation.
Oh.
The third column is Robert Thurman's translation.
I see. Okay.
We were able to get through someone who holds Jeffrey's unpublished translation of that Prasangika section, permission to just cite this little passage, not because Jeffrey, hopefully he'll eventually, I'm hoping he'll eventually publish it. I don't know if he will, but anyway. So the second column I put was Jeffrey's translation, and you can compare it with Robert's translation. Robert's translation generally is okay, except in that third column on the bottom of that page, he has a rather big mistake where he says, otherwise, the reason of the presence of smoke in an occasionally smoky kitchen, I have occasionally in bold and italic there, would pervade the existence of fire in that kitchen. This is because the reason of the presence of occasional smoke proved the invariable concomitance of the presence of fire. What he take as occasional is this la. La is a Tibetan word for pass. So la would mean on a pass, on a smoky pass, where he's taking it occasional. So that's the only error in substance in his translation there.
Okay. Thank you. The second thing. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, you have another question.
No, actually, a statement. A second thing I wanted to mention is that it's time for you to take your break.
Yeah, let me just go a little bit further, and we'll take a break. Thank you for that. So, in view of the above, in Jimpa's text now, where we just finished that section where he had note 396. In view of the above, how is it how is this statement of no position to be understood? How is this quotation from Prasanapada, the clearly worded or clear words, Chandrakirti's word commentary to fundamental wisdom, right? So how are we to understand this? So the statement from Prasanapada says, we accept the establishment of conventional truth in terms of mere conditionedness, not on the basis of adhering to any of the four positions. And those four positions we talked about before: self-production, other production, production from both, and production without any cause. Otherwise, there is the consequence that things would possess intrinsic nature, which is untenable, which is unreasonable, which is not right. If one accepts this mere conditionedness, cause and effect will then be mutually contingent and thus will not exist by virtue of an essence. As a result, one will then not speak of things as being endowed with intrinsic nature. Again, one of these tough nuts to crack. You have to be a squirrel with big, strong teeth to crack some of these. So what's being talked about there? There is another PDF which you may have. I think it's called Note 397. Do you have Doris? Did you posted that?
I think Richard has it ready. I hope.
I don't, but I'll find it and post it.
Oh, okay, I'll get it. Just give me a moment.
Okay, so we some of you may have had it. I think it was posted on Facebook, right? The Facebook group page. But some of you may not have it. So if you haven't looked on that. So what this is another kind of section here with the Prasanapada section that's being quoted here. The middle is Anne MacDonald's translation of that from the Sanskrit. And the third is the portion that Lama Tsongkhapa is quoted. There's just a small portion of that Lama Tsongkhapa is quoting. And so you can compare the context here of what's being talked about. So this quotation from Prasanapada that is just being excerpted here, just an excerpt, right? Citation. We accept the establishment of conventional truth in terms of mere conditionedness, not on the basis of adhering to any of the four positions. So when it says we, that's Chandrakirti, that means we Prasangikas accept the establishment of conventionality. The word truth doesn't appear in that statement. Chimpa's added that. We accept the establishment of conventionality in terms of mere conditionedness, not on the basis to adhering to any of the four positions. So Anne MacDonald's translation of that is in the second column there, if you have that PDF already. She says, the surface level's establishment through mere conditionality, Jimpa says mere conditionedness. So Anne MacDonald's translation of surface level is what? What is she translating there? Paul?
Presumably Gunsop or Samvriti, conventional, what we call conventional truth or conventional.
Right. Samvriti doesn't have the Samvriti Satya is conventional truth. But Samvriti itself just means conventional. So, or she's translated as surface level. So as opposed to the deep or true level, I guess is what. So she says the surface level's establishment through mere conditionality is accepted by us, not, however, an establishment through acceptance of the fourfold position. Okay, so that's the beginning of that. So just to give the context, just before that, at the top of the page, where it says Anne McDonald, page 200, and I think many of you downloaded that that copy of Anne McDonald's translation of the first chapter of Prasanapada. So this is in the context here. It says, at this point, the opponent, which is essentially the Samkhya here, says if things do not arise from self, from other, from both, or without a cause, then why did the exalted one, why did the Bhagavan, usually we translate, just Bhagavan, why did the Bhagavan say, with ignorance as condition, the impulses come to be? So with ignorance as condition, what's the first link in the 12 links? Ignorance, right? What's the second link? Stephen, do you remember?
Becoming?
Karmic formations, right? Or that's how we often translate in our text, but it's actually samskara. So samskara, many translators say, oh, this is such a hard thing to translate. It's not samsara, samskara, right? And what is it in Tibetan, Paul?
It says the duce.
Uche, right? So we translate it as compositional factors or compositional, karmic composition or something like that. Due to ignorance, there is compositional. There is the formation of karma. That's often how we say in the 12 links. Due to the formation of karma, due to that condition, there is consciousness. That means a consciousness that has been imbued with that karmic imprint, right? When you talk about the 12 links. So why did the Bhagavan, why did the Buddha say with ignorance as a condition, samskara comes to be if things do not arise from self? It sounds like the Bhagavan was saying that samskara is produced from ignorance, right? That's what the Samkhya's or the others are saying. Reply: this is the surface level, or samvriti. This is conventional, not true reality, not the ultimate reality. Question: is it in the case of the surface level not necessary to point out how it is established? So this is going back to the other position. Answer: Prasangika would say, the surface level's establishment through mere conditionality is accepted by us. So that's what Jimpa translated as, we accept the establishment of conventionality, let's say, in terms of mere conditionedness, not on the basis of adhering to any of the four positions. So when you talk about conventional truth or conventionality, from the Prasangika point of view, you're talking about it being established by mere conditionedness, or what is the Tibetan here? Keni Dipa Samgi. This was the thing that we talked about earlier, sort of like when the Buddha said, because of this arises. Due to this condition, there is this. Due to the condition of ignorance, there is karmic formations, let's say, or samskara. That's just talking about merely on the mere conventional level, not talking about due to a truly existent ignorance, there arises a truly existent or inherently existent karmic formations. So then Jimpa's text, that quotation, as Jimpa translates this, otherwise there is the consequence that things possess intrinsic nature, or as Anne translates, because that would entail a doctrine which posits that things are endowed with own being or intrinsic nature. And Jimpa just says, which is untenable, but there is the word and in the Sanskrit and in the Tibetan, and because that acceptance of any of the four positions is inappropriate or untenable or just downright wrong. If Jimpa translates, if one accepts this mere conditionedness, cause and effect will then be mutually contingent. I don't know what he means by that, and thus will not exist by virtue of an essence. Anne's translation says, for when mere conditionality is accepted, owing to the mutual reliance of cause and effect, that's what Jimpa is saying, mutually contingent, mutually relying upon one another. Cause, like for instance, cause and effect, from the Prasangika point of view, they don't exist inherently. They only exist conventionally in terms of one relying on the other. A cause exists because it relies on the existence of its effect. An effect can be said to exist conventionally because it relies on its cause. That's what it's talking about here. When Jimpa says mutually contingent, or as Anne translates, mutually reliant, relying upon one another, there is no establishment implying own being. There is no, or Jimpa says, and thus they will not exist by virtue of an essence. And then the last line says, as a result, Jimpa's translation of that citation, one will then not speak of things as being endowed with intrinsic nature. Or as Anne translates, this is a doctrine whereby things are posited as endowed. Thus, a doctrine whereby things are posited as endowed with own being or intrinsic existence is not maintained by us. That's how she translates that. So that's what this, I wanted to give that little context for that statement from the Prasanapada. If you have your own volume of that, we had put it up on the website, I think the other day, a couple of weeks ago, on Anne's translation of that, you can find the sort of the context of what this argument, the citation is coming from. Okay, so how are we doing? Making sense? Completely bamboozled? Yeah. So attachment does arise from pleasure, right? Pleasurable feeling. That's why Lois is saying that it's not so bad because you just enjoy. You have pleasure in the appearance of your hair or the feel of it or whatever. But that can give rise to attachment, right, Lois? So that's the danger of what's called inappropriate attention. When you experience some feeling, whether it be good or bad or neutral for that matter, and you don't attend to it, you don't pay attention to it with the right discrimination, you're thinking, oh, this is really good. I really like this. This makes me feel good. Then that can cause attachment. If you pay attention to it appropriately, thinking this is impermanent, this is only exists conventionally and not ultimately, and so forth, this is impermanent, that can prevent those delusions from arising.
But then we also can say that attachment brings great suffering, because if we don't realize that it is impermanent and this is just, impermanent. When time comes and you become a middle-aged woman, your hair changes and then you're suffering because the hair is not what it was before.
Yes, exactly.
And they're
So
suffering.
the verse
on
that
that.
we talked about in the foundation of good qualities, Chepe Mingom Dugno Kungigo. So grant me blessings to realize the shortcomings of samsaric perfections. Lama Yeshe used to talk about it. That means pleasurable things, that there is no Chepe Mingom, there's no satisfaction in consumption. The more you consume something, it doesn't give you more, it doesn't cause your thirst for that to be alleviated, like drinking salted water. You might think it gets rid of your thirst, but it actually causes more thirst. So there's no ultimate satisfaction in consuming and experiencing happiness, for instance, or the perfections of cyclic existence. They are the door to all suffering, and they are unreliable, like the samsaric perfections of your hair. At any rate, okay. So let's get back. So today we didn't have a break in the recording, so that's the people who will watch the YouTube recording will have some interesting sidelights there. So right after that citation from Prasanapada in Drupal Jinpa's text, right after the note 397, Jinpa translates, in this manner, Chandrakirti explains the distinction between the kind of arising he does accept and the kind that he does not. Okay, the production or arising that he accepts is the conventional arising. Just because of this, that arises. Not talking about a conventionally, a truly inherently existent cause giving rise to an inherently existent result. Fundamentally, he states that if one accepts arising in terms of the four theses, these four positions, from self, other, both, or causeless, one then has to speak of things being endowed with intrinsic natures, inherent existence. Therefore, if one accepts arising from other, one subscribes to the notion of intrinsic arising necessarily, or one would necessarily have to accept the idea of intrinsic arising. And in contrast, excuse me, if one accepts arising by way of mere dependent origination, this Keni Dipasam, this mere conditionality, one need not accept intrinsic arising. So this is we're getting to this subtle point in the text that Geshe Zopa used to spend a lot of time on. When generally when you talk about the three positions that are generally excluded are relatively easy to refute: production from self, production from both, and production without cause. The difficult one, in a sense, is production from other. But when you talk about production from other, the implication is that the other is an inherently existent other. But if you accept, as it says here, if one accepts arising by way of mere dependent origination, one need not accept intrinsic arising. As Venerable Joan translated, with respect to the two distinctions of asserting and not asserting production from self, and the reasons for these two, it is said that if one asserts production from the four positions, one must propound inherent existence. Therefore, it is clearly said that if production from other is asserted, it is necessary to assert inherent production. Whereas if mere production, which is a dependent arising, is asserted, it is not necessary to assert inherent production. So when we say dependent origination or dependent arising here, we're talking about the Prasangika view of dependent arising, because the lower tenets say that these phenomena, causes and effects and so forth, are dependent arisings. There is dependent origination, but they're saying that because of an inherently existent ignorance, there will come about inherently existent karmic formations and so forth. Okay, so here, the next statement I have highlighted in my text here, because this is a statement that Geshe Zopa used to quote throughout the course. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, therefore, other, the word other, in the context of arising from other, or other in the context of other production, production from other, does not refer to just to a mere otherness. Jimba says to just otherness. The Tibetan actually says mere otherness, I think. Ditana shenke shenni, the other of other production. Shen samshik mingi. Shen sam means mere other, is not a mere other. It is rang shingi drupe shen yimbe, since it is an other which is established by inherent existence. So Geshe said, in the Prasangika system, a little later it is stated, shenle ke, that kind of shen is not mere other. This is a statement he made many weeks before this context. That shen, that other, is an inherently existent other, inherently existing others. From inherently existing others, itself arises inherently. That is the meaning of shenke. In the four positions, in the four theses that Nagarjuna mentioned at the beginning of his first chapter, not from self, not from other. When he says not from other, that's implying not from an inherently existent other. Not talking about a mere, he's not refuting that phenomena arise from a merely existent other. He's refuting that they arise from an inherently existent other. So Jimpa says, therefore, other in the context of arising from other does not refer to just otherness. I prefer mere other. It's not a mere other, because from the Prasangika point of view, cause and its effect, its immediate effect, are mere others. They are merely imputed as other. They're not inherently existent other. If they were inherently existent other, a cause could never give rise to an effect, because both would be inherently existent. They would be independent. They couldn't change if they were inherently existent. That's kind of the sense of inherent existence here. So therefore, other in the context of arising from others does not refer to a mere otherness. It is an intrinsically established other, intrinsically existent or inherently existent other. As such, extreme, absurd consequences are revealed to those who accept this thesis. What thesis? That phenomena are produced from other, with the implication that they are produced from an inherently existent other. Such consequences are not leveled against accepting mere otherness. Oh, here he uses mere in his translation there. So you don't have these absurd consequences of thick darkness arising from flames and so forth. When you talk about the cause and effect as being merely other. How are we doing? Making sense? Rocio, what do you think?
I have a question, and I'm sorry, I'm going to stop the class and go to a very basic level. Can you please elaborate a little bit on mere?
Yeah, mere. So in Tibetan, it's the Tibetan word tsam, like Tzam. In Sanskrit is the word matra, like in chitta matra. So chitta matra, or in Tibetan we say samba. Sam means mere mind or only mind, mind only, the mind only school, right? So that's the same sam we're talking about, mere, but it has a different meaning there. Here, for something to be existent from the Prasangika point of view, that doesn't mean that it exists inherently. That's what appears to us. Phenomena appear to be inherently existent. So our minds accept that, right? But the way that phenomena exist is as being merely imputed by thoughts and names, like monk, like in the Vajrachatika, in the Vajrakutta Sutra, monk or bhikshu is just a name, the Buddha said. That doesn't mean, you can be kind of confused unless you study a little bit about what the Buddha was intending. Let's say from our point of view, from the Prasangika point of view, a monk is a name, is just a name, is merely a name, means is merely imputed by a name or a concept. We say, what is this? Oh, this is a mug. If you're reading the transcript, you have to say, I'm holding my Yeti insulated mug. Say, this is a mug. That is just, that mug exists merely as a name attributed to that collection of parts. The appearance of those parts is not the mug. The mug that does exist is the merely imputed name, merely imputed concept of a mug on those parts, on that basis of imputation. So when we talk about mere here, we're talking this kind of meaning of mere. Such consequences are not leveled against accepting mere otherness, an otherness, and a state of being other, let's say cause and effect, in which they are merely imputed as being other. They're not accepted as being inherently existent other. Making sense? KT, how are you doing?
Pretty good, hanging in there.
Okay, no, I meant
Thanks, Venerable George.
in terms of
So when we say the mere conditionedness, back to the a little bit before,
yeah,
when that is the conventional truth, that's how we're defining it. And then is the mere
we're not defining conventional truth that way, but we're talking about conventionality, that things are that they arise merely because of this, because of ignorance, as a relation, because of the cause, there is an effect. We're not stating that because of an inherently existent cause, there will arise an inherently existent effect, but because of a merely existent cause, one which is merely imputed as a cause, there will be a merely imputed effect.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go a little bit further, because this is like this section sort of has all of the elements that you really need to know about Prasangika view of emptiness related to conventionality and so forth. So Jimpa's text continues. This consequential argument, I think what he means is this Prasangika argument, is similar in logical style to the one found later in the text, where it reads, things different from each other through intrinsic characteristics could not logically be part of a single continuum. Do you see that? Venerable Joan translated that how she has it broken up because she has those individual phenomena established by way of their own character are not suitable to be included in one continuum. So Jimpa translates, things different from each other through intrinsic characteristics could not logically be part of a single continuum, it's not correct. I think it says merik, right? What does it say there? Rik mayin is not right. He says it's not logical. This means the same thing. It's not correct. So what is this talking about? If you have a continuum, and let's say Maitreya is a guy. Maybe he was a monk, maybe he's a layman. I'm not talking about the famous future Buddha. Let's say just the name Maitreya. Or let's say Karen. Karen is a continuum. Okay. Karen of yesterday was part of that continuum. Karen, when she was 6 years old, is part of that continuum. Karen, when she'll be 80, will be part of that continuum. Whereas David, who is different than Karen, is not suitable to be part of Karen's continuum, right? They could be partners, but it's just like Maitreya and Upagupta, another Tibetan, another Sanskrit name, two guys, Maitreya and Upagupta. So why do I mention that? So here this quoting coming later in the text, verse 661 C and CD, right? You see that? Let me see if I can, how do I get in my, there we go. Search for six 0.61. Okay. So this comes up in the context of refuting the Chittamatra. So I will read to you, if you actually go to this section where in the text verses 660 and 661 come, and I don't know the exact page that is in the Tibetan text. I mean, in your English text, I've got the electronic version. So verse 660 says, you Chittamatrans may say that though these moments are distinct, they have no separate continua. So therefore the objection does not apply. But this thesis is unproven, for such a single shared continuum is untenable. So the verse in question here is the next verse, 661. Attributes of Maitreya and Upagupta, who are distinct, let's say, mule and goat. Mule and goat can't be part of the same continuum, right? A goat, like what I said, not to say Karen goat, said before, Karen has her own continuum. Her continuum is separate, is distinct from David's continuum. Maitreya and Upagupta, two different people who are distinct, cannot belong to a single continuum. That's how that verse 661 begins. Things different from each other through intrinsic characteristics could not logically be part of a single continuum. That's the context of this statement as Jimpa is translating it from Lama Khapa. He's calling upon verse 661 later in the text in Madhyamakavatara, when Chandrakirti is refuting the Chittamatra system. Okay, so they're talking in that context. It has some particular significance, which we'll come to eventually. Okay, so here, how can I get back to my regular page here? There we go. I have to go back. Here we go. So in Jimpa's text here, he says, this consequential argument is similar in logical style to the one found later in the text. So what consequence? We're talking about, therefore, other in the context of arising from other does not refer to just otherness or mere otherness. It refers to an intrinsically established other. As such, extreme absurd consequences are revealed to those who accept this thesis. Such consequences are not leveled against one accepting mere otherness. And then Jimpa's translation says, this consequential argument is similar in logical style to the one found later in the text, which we just read the whole verse 661 about Maitreya and Upagupta. Things that are different from each other through intrinsic characteristics, like Maitreya and Upagupta, like Karen and David, could not logically be part of a single continuum. So then he continues there, it means in the context of that verse 661, against the assertion that although earlier and later temporal stages of a thing are distinct, they share the same continuum. So who's asserting this? There's an assertion, in that case, it's Chittamatra, but in general, all of the lower schools say that if you have a thing, like my mug or Karen or Maitreya, or whatever, it has its own continuum, and that the earlier and later moments of it, the individual moments, are distinct, they're different. However, when they say that, they're accepting that they're inherently different. They're against the assertion that although earlier and later temporal stages of a thing are distinct or different, still they share the same continuum. That's the assertion. Against that assertion, the Prasangika would say the objection is raised that if the two things are distinct by virtue of their intrinsic characteristics, the two things here could mean the earlier and later moments, if they are different inherently by their inherent nature, they cannot belong to the same continuum. Does that make sense to you? I see some people kind of nodding like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Why is that? If they're in, if the moments of a continuum were inherently different, they couldn't belong to the same continuum in the same way that as Maitreya and Upagupta are even conventionally different, not talking about inherently different, they can't belong to the same continuum. Because if the two, Jimpa says, relata, he's adding here the two things that are being considered, right? Like the earlier and later moments of a continuum. For if they, the two relata, are other from each other by virtue of intrinsic characteristics or inherent nature, any contingent relationship between the two would become untenable. How does he use the word contingent relationship? This is talking about the Tibetan word. What did it say here? Tope telwa. Topa means reliance. So there are different kinds of relationships. Does anyone remember there are two kinds of relationships? Do anyone remember what they are? Nadine remembers.
Causal and natural.
Causal and natural relationship, right?
Yes.
So among those two, when it says here, tope dewa, that means relationship of reliance. Are both of those relationships of reliance or contingent, as Chimpa has? An effect relies on its cause, right? So causal relations are, in Jimpa's term, contingent relations, or we would say relations of reliance. But in a natural relationship, what's a natural relationship, Paul? Example.
Would it be an object and its qualities?
Yeah, that have that have a natural relationship, like let's say sound and impermanence. They are naturally related, right? They are not causally related. Sound does not cause impermanence. Impermanence does not cause sound, but they have a relationship of being the same nature, right? So here it's excluding natural relationships in this context here. It says, if the two things are distinct by virtue of their intrinsic characteristics, they cannot belong to the same continuum. For if the two relata are other from each other by virtue of their intrinsic characteristics, any contingent relationship, any relationship of dependence between the two would become untenable. That means if one instant of the continuum is a cause of a later instant of the continuum, doesn't have to be the immediately next instant of the continuum. It can become like say the present instant of Karen is the cause of the next instant of Karen. It's also the cause of tomorrow's Karen, and next week's Karen, is a distant cause. So if they were inherently existent, there couldn't be that relationship of reliance, that one would rely upon the other. because if the two are other from each other by virtue of intrinsic characteristics, that they were inherently different, if they were other from each other by virtue of their intrinsic characteristics, any contingent relationship, any relationship of reliance between the two would be untenable. They couldn't rely on one another if they were inherently existent. Why not? Because if they were inherently existent, one of the qualities of something, theoretical qualities of inherent existence, when we try to identify it, is something that exists from its own side without relying on anything else. So that if an effect could not rely, an inherently existent effect could not rely on an inherently existent cause, because by their very, our conception of what inherent existence is and how it appears to us, they could not be, they would not have a relationship of reliance. They wouldn't rely on one another, because the very nature of a theoretical inherently existent phenomena would be one that doesn't rely on anything else. It just exists from its own side. I think Louise is happy about that. She's smiling. Richard, what do you think? Is it making sense?
Yes, it does. Makes sense to me.
Okay. Mikhail?
Yeah, so that's meaning that if they are intrinsically other, then they are completely unrelated.
Right. So they couldn't have, as Jimpa's translating here, this relationship of contingency, or they couldn't have a relationship of dependency. They couldn't depend on one another. Yet, if they are totally unrelated, then absurd consequences will ensue. That is, when a particular effect arises from its cause, it should do so from all other causes. That is, so this is the absurd consequence that we encountered before, that Nadine was pointing out when we talked about these two absurd consequences of when we talked about other production, right? That, for instance, thick darkness would arise from fire. And what was the other consequence, Nadine?
Cause and non-cause would become equal.
Right. So here it's saying if they're totally unrelated, then absurd consequences will ensue. That is, when a particular effect arises from its cause, it should do so from all other causes, even non-causes. That is, the rice sprout should arise from other things that are not its cause. What is its cause? The rice seed, right? So it should arise from other things, such as a barley seed or a boulder, anything else that is not its cause. It should arise from it because they are similar in being inherently other. And then Jimpa's text continues, and when a particular cause produces its effect, it should produce all others that are not its effects as well. So like that, so from flames, from the tip of a flame, there should ensue thick darkness, which are not its effect, but it should produce those if they are inherently other. Following? Take some time to think about. The reason some people do not understand this type of reasoning, as explained above, is because they fail to clearly differentiate what exactly is to be negated in delineating the object of negation, on the one hand, again, this Jimpa's translation is a little bit different here, from what minimal standpoints are to be accepted in the presentation of dependent origination. So when engaged in refuting the object of negation, recall what was said above concerning the criterion of what is to be negated. And this is note 398. This is a cross-reference to chapter 9 on identifying the object of negation. So what is he saying here? The reason that some people do not understand this type of reasoning, what type of reasoning? That if phenomena were inherently existent, if there was an inherently existent other, for instance, in other production, there would be all sorts of absurd consequences as a result of that. And because those consequences are unbelievable, they can't happen, they're untenable, they're wrong, therefore one can refute production from inherently existent other. But one cannot refute the existence of production from merely existent other. Okay, so the reason some people do not understand this type of reasoning, as explained above, is because they fail to clearly differentiate what exactly is to be negated in delineating the object of negation on the one hand. So what does that mean? Anyone might want to make a stab? Stephen? They fail to clearly differentiate what exactly is to be negated in delineating the object of negation.
I don't think I want to make a stab, Venerable George.
Shanka? You're still catching up, I think. Right? You would make a stab in other circumstances if your roof was not infested with pack rats. Mikhail?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I was just going to make a stab at it, which is that
okay.
that when you are thinking, when you are thinking about the object of negation, then not to include more than is necessary, but include exactly what is necessary.
Right. You don't want to have over specification. You don't want to have under, you don't want to be, what are the terms, Paul? Remember in the debate with Jeffrey, with Geshe Sopa and Alex Wayman.
Right, they're negating too much, basically, is what's going. Yeah.
One is negating too much, one is negating not enough. So what would be negating not enough? What would be an example of that? Well, let's say like the Svatantrika.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly.
So they negate true existence, supposedly,
right.
They claim, but they say, well, but come on, inherent existence exists.
Right.
So they're not refuting enough. What would be refuting too much?
The position of nihilism.
Well, yeah, like say what?
That nothing exists, that there isn't even mere existence.
Right. That would be one extreme example of, there's probably some in the gradation.
Like they always say that the Chittamatrans fall to both extremes, right? That they negate too much and that they deny the existence of an external world.
Okay, so that would be another example of negating too much, right? Not only negating existence, but negating the existence of a particular kind of thing, meaning an external world. Good. So the reason some people do not understand this type of reasoning, as explained above, is because they fail to clearly differentiate what exactly is to be negated in delineating the object of negation, as Shanka and Paul have explained. On the one hand, that's one thing that they do wrong. From what minimal standpoints are to be accepted in the presentation of dependent origination. So the FPMT translation has a little bit different. Therefore, not understanding such reasonings well is the fault of not analyzing well the two individual presentations of. So there's two things. So Jimpa was saying on the one hand, so that means on the other hand, there's two things he's talking about. So Venerable Joan had it this way. First thing, not analyzing well the two individual presentations of apprehending the measure of conceiving the object of negation, which is to be refuted, like that explained previously. So not apprehending the measure of conceiving the object of negation. So the measure means what is the correct criteria for what you're negating. You don't want to negate too much. You don't want to negate too little. So that's the sense of the measure here. And dependent arising, which is so asserted. Therefore, when refuting the object of negation, be mindful of the explanation, apprehending the measure of the object of negation. Yeah, so Jimpa says, the reason some people do not understand this type of reasoning is explained above is because they fail to clearly differentiate what exactly is to be negated in delineating the object of negation, on the one hand, from what minimal standpoints are to be accepted in the presentation of dependent origination. So I think that what this is saying that on the if you negate inherent existence correctly, still you have to explain how things are produced in terms of dependent origination. So when engaged in refuting the object of negation, recall what was said above concerning the criterion of what is to be negated. I made a statement last week about theirs. I thought Jimpa left out an apostrophe. Our class grammarian, who's not here today, Diana, corrected me to remind that theirs is a correct, and it doesn't have an apostrophe. There is a use of the word THEIR apostrophe S, but it didn't have to be used there. Here, I'm thinking this should be, maybe I'm wrong again, this should be, so when engaged in refuting the object of negation, recall what was said above concerning the criteria of what is to be negated. Criterion just means one thing. I think there's criteria of over and under, but you could think about that and tell me if I'm wrong there. Okay, so we're going to stop there. We have discussion group on Monday for those who have the time and space. So we're going to begin next time in this next outline, demonstrating that it is not a contradiction to accept the reverse of the consequences. So there are three consequences that are mentioned in Prasanapada, each of which can be misinterpreted, and we're going to be talking about those. So if you want to read ahead. Right now, do you have any questions? How are we doing? Did it make sense today, or was it like the ground beef or something like that? Mikhail, did it make sense?
Yeah, I'm still trying to understand the very last paragraph here about how they over negate or negate not enough, because the proponents are asserting that things, cause and effect, are intrinsically other. They are at the same time accepting or saying that cause and effect still share something, still have some relation.
Right. They claim that, but that will come up again in the not so distant future. And especially when we're talking about Maitreya and Upagupta and so forth, they'll be quite a bit further. They would like to say they're inherently different, but still it doesn't matter because they share the same continuum. But they couldn't share the same continuum if they were inherently existent. Just from the simple logic that we're beginning to understand now, and all these different kinds of little logical points. Remember, we mentioned at the beginning, the bodhisattvas, the hearers and solitary realizers realize emptiness through a small number of logical reasonings, but the bodhisattvas need a myriad of reasonings, and we're learning these reasonings now that we can start to see more clearly. If something were part of a continuum, any individual moment or element of it couldn't be inherently existent, because then it would not rely on its previous moment. It couldn't be relied on to give forth another moment, and so forth. So moments of a continuum cannot be inherently existent.
So these proponents do not refute enough.
Right.
Okay.
They are underachievers, under refuters.
Thank you.
Okay. I could recommend to you, if you're having any body problems, I just had a therapeutic massage the other day that helped very much. It cost a bunch, but my body felt so much more flexible afterwards. I'm looking forward to some more. So if you want to treat yourself to something, treat yourself to a.
What do you have? Oh, maybe I'll ask you later. So it's not on the recording, all this stuff. So yeah, okay.
Okay, doesn't matter. So any last questions? If not, we're going to dedicate the virtues we created. We created a lot of collection of wisdom, right? Today. Maybe some collection of merit also. Go on. Yeah, there we go. Due to these virtues, gewadi, the word merit doesn't appear in the Tibetan there. Gewadi, so that virtues include both collection of merit and wisdom. Due to these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha. May I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception, friends, enemies, strangers, without exception, into that enlightened state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow in my mind stream and in the mind streams of others. And may that which has arisen not diminish, not be degenerated, but increase more and more. And then there's a prayer after that for the quick return of reincarnation of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of the offspring of the conquerors, the Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, Conqueror Losang Drakpa, Lama Tsongkhapa, who is the spiritual father to his two spiritual sons, Kedrupje and Gyaltsabje, as well as your lineage, all objects of refuge in the infinite realms, please bestow now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request, sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. At this I was lost. I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And then one more prayer.
Oh, sorry. Hang on. Let me share again. Sorry.
So just to our general, all our gurus, like for instance, some of you may have taken the from His Holiness last night, who's your guru from many Yangtze Rinpoche and Serkon Rinpoche, who was at the center recently, and other lamas. So you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, you allow me to penetrate them, to see them, to understand them. Supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation. Gateway means the entrance. Engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, meaning both love and compassion, illuminating spiritual friends, please live long and stable lives. The Tibetan says, Selze Shenyan Namla, so I make this request. So thank you very much for your patience. We had some people off today doing other things.
There's an event at Shantideva Center right now, so I think that's why a number of the Shantideva people are
right. Snehi and Jennifer.
Yeah. And John sent his apologies. He said that family life had intervened again today.
Yes. So, and who is our Suresh? Is that his name? Suresh. Suvansh is off doing retreat this weekend. He sent me an email apologizing. So look forward to seeing you on, many of you, hopefully on Monday, because this is tricky stuff. It's worth going over. And at least next Saturday. Take care. Be good.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shaka.